There is this narrative out there, and it's a very popular narrative and it's very compelling, which is that at some point machines are going to become as intelligent as human beings, and then they can apply their intelligence to making themselves even smarter. The story is that it all spirals out of our control. And of course, this is the plot of quite a lot of science fiction movies, notably Terminator. I love those movies just as much as anybody does. But it's deeply implausible. And I became frustrated with that narrative for all sorts of reasons. One of which is that narrative, whenever it comes up in sort of serious debate about where AI is going and what the risks are, there are real risks associated with AI, it tends to suck all the oxygen out of the room, in the phrase that my colleague used, and it tends to dominate the conversation and distract us from things that we should really be talking about.
Right. In fact, there's a discipline that's come out of this called existential risk, right? It's kind of the worrying about the Terminator situation and figuring out how can we perhaps better align these super intelligent agents to human interests. And if you look at not just the narrative, but actually the funding, and what the smartest people are devoting their time into thinking in not only companies, but policy groups, X-risk, existential risk, is the dominant share of the entire market, so to speak. Why do you think this narrative has gained such a big following?
I think it's the low probability but very, very high risk argument I think most people accept that this is not tremendously plausible, but if it did happen, it would be the worst thing ever. And so very, very, very high risk. And when you multiply that probability by the risk, then the argument is that it's something that you should start to think about. But, when the success of large language models became apparent and ChatGPT was released and everybody got very excited about this last year, the kind of debate around this sort of reached sort of slightly hysterical levels. And it became slightly unhinged at some point. My sense is the debate has calmed down a little bit and is being more focused on the actualities of where we are and what the risks are.
Right. I think that's quite a charitable reading, I think, of the psychology, right? It's a rational calculus. There's a small probability, but there's a large sort of cost. I study religious history. And when I talk to people in the X-risk world, the psychology kind of reminds me of the Christian apocalyptics. That there's these people throughout Christian history that are like, now's the time. This happened most recently, probably when we were going through the millennium, right? 1999. Yeah. And it's this psychological drive that wants to grab at something total and eschatological in a way to orient the entire world. Yeah. And so people, I guess what I'm trying to highlighting is, maybe you can see some of the psychology in climate risk as well. It's not to say that these things are true, right? It's not to say that the world isn't ending in Christianity, that the climate isn't changing, or there is no X risk. It's that the reason that people seem attracted to this narrative is almost a religious phenomenon.
I think that's right. And I think it appeals to something almost primal and kind of human nature. I mean, its most fundamental level is the idea that you create something, you have a child and they turn on you. That kind of the ultimate nightmare for parents. You give birth, you nurture something, you create something.
Zeus and
then
Kronos,
it turns
right?
on you.
It's an
Exactly so.
Yeah.
And that narrative, that story is very, very resonant. And for example, you go back to the original science fiction text, Frankenstein. That literally is the plot of Frankenstein. You use science to create life, to give life to something, to create something, and then it turns on you and you've lost control of that thing. So it's a very, very resonant idea, I think. And so very easy for people to latch onto.
Right. It's easy for us to critique the psychology here, but what do you think is wrong, or what do you think people miss about the argument itself? That once we have super intelligent, or at least on par with human level machine intelligence, that they can recursively improve upon themselves. What do you think people are missing when they give too much weight to that argument?
The frustrating part is the Skynet part of the argument, the kind of the Terminator thing, that suddenly this will spiral out of control in ways that we just can't control in an incredibly short period of time. If you look under the hood of how these things work and how many patches are required to hold AI together, it just doesn't seem terribly plausible. More concretely, there are basically two arguments for how existential risk might come around. And the first is the famous paperclip argument, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So you build a highly intelligent machine and you ask it to build as many paperclips as possible, and it follows your instructions in ways that you didn't anticipate.
Right. For example, enslaving all of humanity.
Enslaving all of humanity, right, and turning them to the production of paperclips. Until it turns everything into paperclips. That's the paperclip argument. And there is some strength to that argument in the sense that AI can go wrong in those ways. But for it to hurt us, it has to be empowered to hurt us. Right. We have to give it the keys. We have to give it control.
Assuming there's no guardrails.
And there's no guardrails. And again, that just doesn't seem terribly plausible that we would do that. I mean, it would be a dumb thing for us to do, to hand over the nukes to an AI. So that's the first argument about how AI might become an existential threat. The second argument is just that we build very, very intelligent machines which develop their own goals, which aren't aligned with ours. Now, this is much more nebulous. We don't know how that might happen. And so it's slightly harder to address, but we really aren't at the moment anywhere near that. And I don't see, even with very, very powerful AI that we have now, the roadmap from where we go to that.
Right. So to summarize your understanding, the first case is when the AI is executing our goals, but not ingesting the kind of assumptions and implicit values that humans are imputing. Whereas the second one is the AI have developed their own goals. And there, it seems even more far-fetched because LLMs, as powerful as they are, they don't seem to have any semblance of agency, right? Yeah. And that's fundamentally what it would require. So me and my friends have actually come up with this half-joking term called existential risk, which is the risk upon a society that focuses too much on existential risk and away from other risks that we could actually be facing due to AI today. If you can wave a magical wand and swing the narrative of AI away from X risk, what are the actual problems and conversations that we should be having right now?
We are heading into a world where basically within a decade, 2 decades, I think at the most, pretty much everything we read and see on social media and the internet is going to be AI generated. And we're not going to know what's real and what isn't real in that world. And there are many, many risks associated with that society just fragments because there is no common core of beliefs anymore, that we're all obsessed with some particular issue and that social media and the internet is just driving us around that one particular issue because AI is programmed to pick up on the issues that you care about and to feed you stories emphasizing those risks and so on. Where I was particularly concerned is going into elections in the US, the UK, I was really worried that what we were going to see was social media drowning in AI-generated fake news. Right. We didn't see that as it happens, at least not on the scale that I feared it might occur. But nevertheless, I wouldn't take my eye off that as a risk. I think that's a very, very real risk, that autocratic states control media, just use AI to generate stories, endless stories, fake news stories, that populist politicians do the same thing and so on, and that we just drown in fake news till we no longer know how to tell what's real and what isn't and don't trust anything as a consequence.